there's a lot more to say about it.
Sure.
The thing is being recorded. Yeah, sure. Okay, so thank you again for this introduction and for for having me here. Really, again, I just want to say that I've known Pramod Uncle and Smitanji for so long, and they've really always been such a huge inspiration to me and our whole family in general. So it's just a real honor to be here and be invited by them today. So thank you for that. So today I want to talk to you on the question of masks, vaccines, and the human brain. This talk is part 2 of a 3-part series on brain functions by the Attarde Foundation. I hope you were able to join last week, but for those who are attending for the first time, we extend a special welcome to you. To learn more about the whole series or the Attarde Foundation, you can visit theattardefoundation.org. To learn more about me, you can visit amitchaudharimd.com. I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram as at Amit Chaudhary MD. And that is my cat back there, so don't mind him. He may come and go in the middle. But I hope you are able to connect with me on all of those platforms. Unlike last time, my talk today is a little bit longer, as I mentioned. It's about 45 minutes. It will also go through some complex concepts just because of the nature of this topic. So I would strongly suggest that you grab a piece of paper or a pen to write some things down. You don't have to write everything, but a few words here and there may really help you refer to this talk if necessary. Of course, as Pramod mentioned, we will have a question and answer session at the end. So if questions do come to your mind, please remember them or write them down and we can discuss them later. Okay, so before we begin, I just have a small request that you please keep your microphone off for the entire duration of the talk so it doesn't bother the talk itself. Okay, so this is a toilet. You know, when people think of the greatest inventions by the human race, they think of fire or wheel or agriculture or electricity. But out of all the greatest inventions, none, literally none, has impacted our health more than the toilet. I'll tell you a little story. In the 1800s, people didn't really know much about hand washing. In fact, surgeons would routinely go from doing surgery to delivering babies without washing their hands. And so the infant mortality rate was very high. It was in this time period that Dr. John Snow practiced. He noticed that some people would get very severe cholera, which causes very severe diarrhea, so severe that it led to thousands of deaths all across Europe and India. There was one particularly bad episode in London where hundreds of people got cholera at the same time. Medicine at the time thought that this was because they breathed some vapor or because there was something wrong with their stomachs. However, John Snow went into the houses and the hospitals where every single person had been, and he traced what they ate, what they drank, where they went. And after years of research, he found out that all of them at some point had eaten in a restaurant that served water from a particular pump on Broad Street. It turned out that because of improper sewage, the drinking water from this pump had mixed with the fecal matter from the houses nearby. He convinced local authorities to shut down the pump, and immediately the rates of cholera dropped. He called this the pathogen hypothesis, a hypothesis that bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites, and other small organisms can go into our bodies and cause disease. Like most great scientists and doctors of the day, he was ridiculed, he was shamed, and he was disavowed by his peers. But thankfully, science is the pursuit of truth, not the pursuit of people's approval ratings. Right? Let me say it again. Science is the pursuit of truth. And eventually, more and more and more evidence came out to show that he was indeed correct. Finally, famous doctors like Dr. Robert Koch, who is the father of bacteriology, Dr. Louis Pasteur, who's the father of microbiology, Dr. Alexander Fleming, who's the inventor of the world's first antibiotic, penicillin, and many, many others, they all came together and they fought medical systems and governments to once and for all prove that pathogens, not evil spirits, cause disease. And when we identified the cause of disease, we were able to make treatments for them. And we have made a lot of treatments. Today, we have hundreds of antibiotics, antivirals, and antiparasitic medications that line our pharmacy shelves. We are now able to identify the organism, sequence its entire genome, and create drugs that can kill it, all within a matter of days. But before we give ourselves a pat on the back and congratulate ourselves, let's ask a daring question. With all this science, all this medicine, all these innovations, why then haven't we cured all infectious diseases? With all this science, all this medicine, all the innovations that we have, why haven't we cured all infectious diseases? So just keep that question in mind for now. But I want to transition here a little bit to an infectious disease that we all know and are facing right now, which is COVID-19. Let me start by saying COVID-19 is real. Let me say it one more time. COVID-19 is a real thing. It may have been created in a bioterrorism lab in China, or it may have just come from the unsanitary conditions in the meat market where people and bats and other live animals coexist and people eat them. I'm not arguing about where COVID came from, but I'm saying to you that COVID exists, it's very real, and you would be surprised how many people even today still don't believe in COVID. But again, science is the pursuit of truth, not the pursuit of people's approval ratings, not even the pursuit of people's beliefs and opinions. We have evidence that COVID is here and that it causes illness. Regardless whether you believe it or not, your body is susceptible to COVID-19. To give you a little background, COVID-19 is actually a mnemonic. It stands for Coronavirus Disease of 2019. It is a new virus from the same family as the SARS virus, or the Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome virus. In fact, its real name is SARS-CoV-2, or the second generation of the SARS virus. Typically, COVID-19 causes fevers, cough, or shortness of breath. Most healthy people will feel sick for a little bit of time and then recover, although it is questionable whether they fully recover at all. In fact, hold that thought, because we'll see evidence that even young, healthy people who beat COVID-19 may have some level of permanent brain damage forever. But let's get back to the greater problem. The greater problem is that these young, healthy people will pass the virus to those amongst us who are not so young and not so healthy. Like, for example, our grandparents, or our friends who have diabetes or high blood pressure, and even the most susceptible group of all, our children. For these individuals, COVID-19 can cause pneumonia and respiratory failure. I just want to take a moment here because this term respiratory failure gets thrown around in the media quite a lot. So I just want to make sure I'm conveying to you what it really means. Okay, do one thing with me. So breathe out and take a deep breath in, and then breathe out completely and hold your breath. Is it uncomfortable? Are you still able to hold your breath? Respiratory failure means you cannot breathe. Oxygen, ventilators, and other technological advances are only temporary solutions. If you cannot breathe, you die, period. And actually, trust me when I say this, because I have seen more people die than you probably know in your whole lifetime. Not being able to breathe is by far the worst, most painful way to die. So there's nothing really special about COVID-19. It's a virus. It's meant to infect and kill you, and it spreads from one person to another. All bacteria, viruses, parasites, all pathogens do the same thing. They cause inflammation. Think of inflammation as a war zone. So Here, do something with me again. Imagine you're a ruler of a town. Some people in your town collect wood, some build buildings, some are artists, some are engineers, some are doctors, and so on and so forth. This is your kingdom. And so, of course, you want to protect it. You build walls and you create an army. So when someone attacks your kingdom, you can send your army to fight them. Your body is very similar. Each cell has its purpose, and they all come together to form you. Your body also has an army. It's called your immune system. When these viruses and bacteria and parasites attack, your body sends your immune cells to go fight them off. That's what we call inflammation. Seems simple enough, right? Except, have you ever been to a war zone? What happened in Afghanistan? What happened in Iraq? What happens at the border every day? It would be great if the fight was between one good guy and one bad guy, and somebody won and everyone else went along their merry little world. But a war zone is not like that. It is destruction. Buildings are damaged, crops are decimated, civilians are raped and killed. There is so much pain. When your body sends in the immune system to fight off COVID-19 or any other pathogen, it creates a war zone. And inevitably, your body gets damaged in the process. Meanwhile, the pathogen itself continues to cause harm and destruction everywhere it goes. And so sometimes the body just needs some help. So let's take a look at the proposed treatments for COVID-19, things where we can do something to help that body. They fall into two broad categories. One is antivirals, and two is anti-inflammatory. But before we get to them, let's start with two treatments that were once championed by the most powerful man in the whole world, the 45th US President, Donald J. Trump. He said, in quotes, "Supposing we hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just a very powerful light, and supposing you brought this light inside the body, either through the skin or some other way, and then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it, that is the coronavirus, in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way to do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets in the lungs and it does a tremendous number on the lungs. So it would be interesting to check that." So putting aside that whole thing was not a complete sentence, but regardless, on that day, with that statement, Donald Trump single-handedly launched the darkest day for science and medicine in the 21st century. People went to UV parlors and they burned themselves. They injected bleach and died. Poison control centers across the country saw hundreds upon hundreds of cases of completely avoidable disability and death. Many world leaders immediately reacted to this statement. Even the CEO of Lysol, the company that makes the bleach, said, please do not inject any of our products or use them in any way except to clean surfaces, and then wash your hands after you do that. Current President Joe Biden wrote in a tweet, "I cannot believe I have to say this, but please do not inject bleach." My response was a little different. If you think, or I think, if you are stupid enough to believe that UV light or bleach would cure you of the coronavirus, please go ahead, inject away. The world will be better off with some less stupidity. Anyway, let's get back to the two types of treatments that do have some evidence. Remdesivir. Remdesivir is an antiviral medication, but the virus it treats is hepatitis C, not COVID. Granted, all viruses do share certain properties, but different viruses are as different as the differences between humans and monkeys. There was some initial evidence that remdesivir helped with the coronavirus as well. In fact, over 50 countries authorized remdesivir as an emergency treatment for severe COVID-19. And some studies started to look at its effects even against the Ebola virus. But again, science is the pursuit of truth. Eventually, more and more evidence came forward that showed remdesivir unfortunately had little to no effect. In November of 2020, the World Health Organization recommended against the use of remdesivir for treatment of COVID-19. But of course, people choose what they want to believe, and they continue to come to us and want this drug, and even some doctors continue to use it, sometimes as a last resort. Another type of treatment that's currently available is anti-inflammatory treatment, where we can block the inflammation or the war zone that the body creates. The most famous medication in this type of treatment that you may have heard of is hydroxychloroquine. Hydroxychloroquine is a well-known medication that was first developed to treat malaria, but now is more commonly used to treat arthritis. Hydroxychloroquine stops inflammation. So basically, it reduces the damage from that war zone. It does nothing to help your immune system fight the virus. The same is true for newer agents, tocilizumab and bartizumab, and also for steroids. All of these are in the process of getting FDA emergency approval for treating COVID-19. But it's important to keep in mind again that all these medications will reduce inflammation and make you feel better temporarily. But eventually, the virus will continue to take over unless it is cured. So I've just talked about these two types of treatment here. Of course, there are many others that people will mention. Almost every day, I read about some random person on Twitter or YouTube saying they discovered a secret treatment for COVID that the government doesn't want you to have. Let's just be clear. There is no weed or snake oil or incense or some ancient spice or some other random crap that's been shown effective in curing COVID-19. Most likely what happens is people who benefit from these treatments had immune systems that were able to fight off the virus on their own, like is the case in many healthy people anyways. Just because they took something at that point doesn't mean that that thing is what helped them. So please be careful in who you choose to believe. Please be careful in who you choose to believe. And also be careful in spreading false information, like our former President Donald Trump and many others that I'll talk about in the next few minutes. I'm sorry to say, but no, you did not discover something in your basement or your kitchen that millions of dollars and dedicated scientists could not find in their professional industry-grade laboratories. Think about it this way. I'm sure you saw the iPhone 13 launch this week. Did you know that the microchip inside the iPhone 13 is the size of a small coin, and it contains 15 billion transmitters and capacitors that fire at exact times to bring you the iPhone experience. It represents the work of hundreds of top engineers and scientists working at Apple, along with the millions and millions of dollars in R&D over the entire year. Do you think you can make a better iPhone? Can you make the next iPhone, let's say iPhone 14, by yourself with a soldering iron in your little garage? When some random person tweets that they've found a cure for COVID, they sound just as silly. But regardless, we will get the cure for COVID. We will get the cure for COVID. There are several academic and pharmaceutical centers working on this day and night. And already there are over 10 clinical trials that are running. It is just a matter of time. But keep in mind, whatever treatment or cure we develop will first require the virus to infect you, then your body to develop the war zone. Then you come into the hospital and then getting the treatment. This in itself will cause some level of damage. Wouldn't it be better if we just never got infected in the first place? So far, we've been talking about treatment, but inherent in the treatment, as I described, is the attack of the virus, the creation of this inflammation war zone, and the destruction that will always occur. Studies show people who get COVID-19 and don't even realize it, maybe they were sick for a few hours or didn't get any symptoms at all, still have signs of lung damage. And because of this, they have decreased oxygen to their brain. And several papers are now showing that they suffer from some level of permanent brain damage. It may not make you paralyzed, but over and over again, people report difficulty with learning and memory, or not being able to think as quickly as they used to, or not being able to accomplish things that they could have in the past. There is a famous saying, prevention is better than cure. Prevention is better than cure. Because if you never get the infection, there is no damage. It's that simple. And vaccines are a way to get us there. To understand vaccines, we must recall the most fundamental principle of biology, that all living things are made of DNA, RNA, and protein. That's it. There's nothing else. It's just all living things are made from DNA, RNA, and protein. The virus, the monkey, the tomato you ate, and even you yourself, all living things are made of DNA, RNA, and protein. The genius of life is evident in its simplicity. It is literally just DNA, RNA, and protein. But that is also the reason why it is so difficult to fight the disease. That's the reason why we're not able to eliminate all infectious diseases. Because your immune system needs to know which of this DNA, RNA, protein is from your own body and what is a foreign DNA, RNA, protein, a foreign antigen that needs to be attacked. It is akin to identifying that one terrorist suicide bomber in a sea of people who look and dress and act in exactly the same way. But just like the police have tools to do this, we have vaccines. Vaccines help prime your immune system to identify what is a pathogen. Some vaccines contain parts of dead bacteria and viruses. Some contain live pathogens in very small quantities, enough to cause the inflammatory response, but not enough to give you the actual infection. The idea is that once your immune system knows what to look out for, it can quickly create antibodies that can be used in case a real infection occurs. However, as evolution has continued, some bacteria and viruses have disguised their foreign proteins to look exactly like your own. And this is the case with coronavirus. If you inject dead or live coronavirus, it either doesn't do anything or it evades the immune system and causes a full-blown infection. This is why we needed a different approach. One where we could create the antibodies to the coronavirus without using anything about the coronavirus at all. And so enter the COVID vaccine. The COVID mRNA vaccine is a new type of vaccine. The M in mRNA stands for messenger because it carries the message from an RNA to make a protein. Unlike traditional vaccines that inject the proteins of the pathogens themselves, COVID vaccines inject a very small mRNA strand that goes into your cells and then tells them to create that desired protein, which in this case is an antibody to the coronavirus. Because it doesn't contain any part of the virus, there is no way to get COVID-19 from the vaccine itself. Let me say that again. There is no way to get COVID-19 from the vaccine itself. However, because it goes into your cells, there are, of course, some side effects. I read in the famous paper Medium a funny quote one day. They said they should first test the COVID vaccines on government officials. If they are safe, the vaccine is good. If they die, the country is good. But jokes aside, we do vigorously need to test these vaccines. What we don't need, however, is someone making a false claim. You may have heard about a huge headline just this past week that COVID-19 vaccines cause impotence. The great mind who said this is Cardi B. She's a female rapper who is famous for her lyrics on domination, revenge, and aggressive sexual pleasures. She quit school at a very young age and then went on to become a stripper and eventually joined a gang. She then launched a successful career as a rap artist and is now worth over $24 million. Good for her. And she should be commended for her personality and her music. But taking medical advice from her is akin to asking me how to become an Olympic ballet dancer. But stupidity is prevalent, and people do take her advice seriously. So much so that the head of the National Institute of Infectious Diseases, Dr. Anthony Fauci, had to come on screen and state that her claim is false. The person who she made the claim in reference to, which was her cousin, may be impotent for a lot of reasons, like maybe from the sexually transmitted diseases from unprotected, unsanitary sex. But regardless, getting the vaccine did not make him or anyone else impotent. Things like this remind me of a quote I saw another day. It goes like this. Your teacher had to give you your science paper face down in high school because of how badly you failed the class. But now you want to do your own research about the vaccine. It must be really sad to be a doctor nowadays. However, what happens when doctors themselves tell you that vaccines are no good? You may not recognize this paper, but maybe the newspaper headline is more familiar to you. Vaccines cause autism. This is the paper that led to that headline and the start of the anti-vaccine movement. The paper was published in 1998 in the nationally acclaimed journal Lancet. Let me give you a little sense of what that means. There are only 3 journals in the entire world that every medical doctor reads. Doesn't matter where you're practicing medicine in the US or Africa or India or China, it doesn't matter. There's 3 journals that every single medical doctor reads. 1 is the New England Journal of Medicine. 2 is the Journal of the American Medical Association. And 3 is the Lancet. That's it. Nobel Prize winning papers get published in these journals. And this paper was published here. Vaccines cause autism. Why? Well, it turns out people lie. Even doctors lie. Fame and money are very powerful motivators. To explain what he did, this guy looked at a few children with autism. Autism is usually diagnosed around age 1 or age 2. So he saw that all these kids got vaccines during that time or a little bit before, and he made the claim that all vaccines cause autism. This skyrocketed his popularity, and many celebrities, including the television actress and nude model Jenny McCarthy, took this on. Lay people, of course, believed them, and the whole anti-vaccine movement was born. But what do I keep saying? Science is the pursuit of truth. Several doctors tried to replicate what he had done and did not get the results. They kept investigating over and over again with different vaccines and different children, and yet nothing. No one who was given the vaccine got autism. Finally, over years, it was found that he not only falsified the data, but outright lied in the paper. The paper was dishonorably redacted from the journal, and everyone, including the journal and the reviewers and his home hospitals, they all apologized publicly for their failure. But the damage had been done. To explain simply why it got so popular, let's say I conduct a simple experiment. I go into a hospital and take 3,000 people who had car accidents. And I show that all 3,000 of them were driving a four-wheel car when they got into that accident. And so the conclusion is that if you drive a four-wheel car, then you'll get into an accident. And so we should ban all four-wheel cars and only use rickshaws and motorcycles. The logic is linear, but it makes no sense because it doesn't take into consideration all the millions of people who drive four-wheel cars every day and don't get into an accident. He did the same for vaccines. By completely ignoring all the millions of children who get vaccinated each year and don't develop autism, he drew incorrect conclusions. And with his incorrect conclusions, he subjected so many children to horrible diseases like measles, polio, and others, all diseases that could have been entirely prevented had their parents just given them the vaccine. But this is not to say that vaccines don't have side effects. We know now that there are several conditions that people can develop after getting vaccinated. For example, they can have fevers, even severe enough to cause seizures. They can have anaphylaxis and potentially have their heart stop and die. And so here, finally, I get to the topic of the talk today. What do vaccines do to the human brain? Not what you think they do, like cause autism or impotence or whatever else you may believe, but what is actually been proven and what's a very real possibility if you do get the vaccine. Let me introduce you to something called the blood-brain barrier. Let's go back to the analogy where you were king. In addition to the armies and the walls outside the city, as a king, you will probably build a castle for yourself. You know, lots of people and lots of goods and everything else may enter your kingdom, but to enter your castle, they would have to pass through rigorous security and everything must be tightly controlled. That is the blood-brain barrier. Your brain is the most important thing in the body, and it is separated from the rest of the body by a special membrane that checks everything 100 times before allowing it to pass into the brain. So you can go off eating vada pavs and drinking Fantas and putting all sorts of random other crap in your body, but your body will not let it pass into your brain. So what do vaccines do to your brain? I once saw a tweet from a man who said, I am not getting a COVID vaccine so they can microchip me. The man didn't realize that he was typing this into a phone that he carries 24 hours of the day, that recognizes his fingerprint and his Face ID, that knows all the locations he goes to, that knows all his passwords and social security numbers and bank accounts, that has pictures of all his family and all the embarrassing things that he's ever done, and that constantly logs his thought, his every thought, each time that he types into it. I mean, is there a height to stupidity? But still, lots of people believe that vaccines contain microchips. Let me put this to rest. We simply don't have the technology to do this yet. In fact, I would love to put microchips in people's brains. And we are, in fact, working on this very project in our center. But so far, we have to open the brain and put the chips there. Simply injecting it will not allow anything the size of a microchip to cross the blood-brain barrier. period. However, that doesn't mean vaccines have no effects on the brain. Despite the protection of this barrier, there are some things that your brain needs. There are some things that must pass the barrier. For example, the king in his castle must get some food and clothes, just like your brain must get some nutrients and oxygen. And as viruses become better at mimicking our own body, our treatments against them, including the COVID mRNA vaccine, are unfortunately better at evading the security of the blood-brain barrier and entering into our brains. There are now studies that vaccines can cause an increase in stroke. They can also themselves cause inflammation in the brain, known as aseptic encephalitis. If you already have an autoimmune disease like multiple sclerosis, vaccines can cause your disease to become worse. Some vaccines have even been linked to permanent nerve and permanent brain damage. However, the incidence of these things is extraordinarily minimal. In mathematical terms, if you calculate it, you are more likely to get hit by lightning twice in the same day than you are to get a serious vaccine side effect. And all this brings me to faith. A man was once asked, what would convince you to get the vaccine? He said, call me a snob, but I'm holding out for that 100% effective vaccine. So here's my response. The only 100% effective vaccine is death. If you are dead, the coronavirus cannot infect you. I can guarantee that 100%. But we will never have a 100% effective vaccine. And we will never have a vaccine that has no side effects. Let me repeat it. We will never have a 100% effective vaccine. And we will never have a vaccine that has no side effects. I already told you about the potential side effects, and I also told you how rare they are. Here's another piece of information, which should just be intuitive, but let me say it just in case. If you get COVID-19, the effects on your brain are extraordinarily worse. Yes, vaccines can give you small strokes, but COVID can block off whole arteries in your neck. Yes, vaccines can give you fevers for a day, but COVID will cause your lungs to fail until you die a horrible, painful death. There is a risk and benefit to everything we do in medicine. I am not here to tell you to get the vaccine or to tell you not to. I only ask you one question. Do you have faith? Do you have faith in medicine? Let me make another analogy. Many of you may believe in God. When you pray, or you go to the temple, or you do other things, you hope that good things will happen to you. But inevitably, something bad will happen. You'll lose your job, or someone close to you will die. Something bad will happen because that's just the nature of life. In that moment, what do you say? Do you say, God, how could you do this? You must not exist, or you must not have any power. I now don't believe in you at all. You are completely useless. Or do you say that it may be a test, or maybe I did not understand his will? But despite this particular bad thing that happened to me at this time, overall, God is good. See, doctors are not gods. We will mess up a lot of times. We will cause harm, even though we take an oath not to. We will be motivated by fame and money. And we will, as individuals, make a lot of bad decisions. But do you believe we are trying our best to keep you healthy? Do you believe fundamentally that medicine is good. I've highlighted some of the claims that are out there. Some are true and some are obnoxiously false. Tomorrow, you'll open up the newspaper or you'll turn on your TV and you may hear someone else talk about some other claim, something new about vaccines or COVID or some other disease. When you read that, that's when this question comes up. Do you believe medicine is good? Do you believe that the medical system does its best to keep you healthy? Do you believe that vaccines are there to keep you healthy? Because if you don't believe this, don't take the vaccine. In fact, don't take any medicine. Don't listen to any doctor. Don't listen to this talk. Don't visit our hospital because we cannot help you. I'm sorry. If you trust in what we have built, if you trust in science, if you think science is the true pursuit of truth, if you trust that our intention is to help you, you should still know that we still may not be able to treat you, but God promised we are trying our absolute best. Which brings me to my last topic, masks. This is our wedding mask. On March 3rd, 2021, I got married to the most beautiful, elegant, motivated, and loving woman I ever knew. She grounds me. She inspires me. She teaches me how to be alive. I cannot imagine my life without her today. And I'm sure many of you feel the same way about your person, whether it's your wife, or your mother, or your little baby, or even your dog. I hope that you have someone who you love. Imagine if someone stabbed that person and threw her to die. How would you feel? I know if something like that happened to my Christina, I would very much be devastated. I would not tolerate it. I would be very, very angry. So why in the world would I allow some unvaccinated idiot to sneeze on her, to give her COVID, and send her to a hospital to lie in pain until she dies? This whole talk has largely been about vaccines, because arguably getting a vaccine does involve putting something in your body. And even though the side effects are minimal and way less than if you actually get COVID, there are no doubt side effects. But here is the side effect to wearing a mask. Are you ready? Nothing. Not a single one. Wearing a mask is 100% safe. And it is also quite effective. In 1762, 300 years earlier, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, one of the very well-known philosophers, he wrote a book called The Social Contract. In it, he argued that by being part of a society, we agree to surrender some of our freedom to make sure that our community and our species as a whole survive. For example, we give up the right to walk around naked, and we agree to wear pants. We give up the right to just walk in and take whatever we want from a store without paying for it. We give up our right to rape and kill other people. We do this voluntarily and out of the goodness of our hearts so that our community and our society can strive and thrive. The police and the laws are just there for reinforcement, but for the most part, the good in people is what drives the society forward. So I agree to temporarily give up my freedom and wear a mask. It is temporary. It doesn't do any harm to me. And it may help another person not get COVID. Because, yes, I would be devastated if somebody gave Christina COVID, or somebody gave my dad COVID, or my mom. However, if I was the reason that the person you most dearly love had to suffer from COVID, I would never be able to forgive myself. Krishna, Buddha, even Jesus Christ, all the major world religions start with one philosophy, ahimsa. If you harm someone, there is no peace for you in this world or the next. I couldn't agree more, especially if all you had to do was wear a simple mask. By spreading COVID-19, you are causing more harm than you realize. It's not just the people who get COVID, but their families, their children, and even beyond that, COVID causes burnout in doctors, in overcrowded hospitals, and it puts a strain on the entire medical system to be able to treat not just COVID, but any and all diseases that we suffer from. All because some people believe that their macho manliness is related to being able to roam around without masks. If that's how you define yourself, you indeed have a very sad life to live. We are in the middle of a pandemic. Again, it's not a matter of whether you believe in it or not. The data, the people, everything shows that it is true and it's happening now. Masks are not a permanent solution. They're only temporary. Until we have good treatments, wearing a mask seems like a small sacrifice for our collective human species. Yes, it may suppress your individuality. Yes, it may make your nose itchy or your face uncomfortable. Yes, it may fog up your glasses. Yes, you may have to give up some of your freedom. But maybe, just maybe, it will help save someone I love dearly from dying a slow, painful death. In the end, the choice is yours. I can only pray that you make the right one. And so with that, I want to thank the Attarde Foundation for giving me this opportunity to talk to you about masks, vaccines, and their effects on the human brain. I am really inspired by what the Attarde Foundation does every day and how much you give selflessly for others. Your donations to charity, your service to our community, they're all truly, truly commendable. And so thank you for having me here. Just a reminder that if someone does want to connect with me, I'm usually pretty good about checking Twitter and Instagram, and I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts about today's talk. And if you want to collaborate on other talks or projects, I would be more than happy to be involved. So thank you again, and I'm going to give this back to Pramod Uncle now.
Thanks, Amit. This is absolutely amazing and a very simple language where a layman can easily understand. You put through all important, you covered all the topics, and thanks for that. So now we open it for any questions if few of our audience have. A lot of are the doctors, so they may not have questions, but if someone who is not a doctor and has any question or any more curiosity about today's topic, we can open it up. Good. People are smart, so no questions.
That's good. Well, as I said, I'm available if someone wants to talk to me at a later time. But I thank you again for your attention, and I will stay here until the last participant is left. But if anyone wants to say anything, feel free.
Good evening, doctor. I have one question. May I speak now?
Yes, sure.
Okay, in the middle, our doctor said that those who believed to inject pesticides in blood, he said, come on, let them. The world is better off such fools. You did. Agree? Agree, sir? You did.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
okay. Now the question is because I never wore any such mask because I felt very, very uncomfortable. And now on the same line, if I say Those who can die with COVID, let them. After all, it's a struggle and survival of the fittest. Now I'm going by your line only. So how would you evaluate my statement?
I
Because
would absolutely
after all,
welcome it.
medical science was not going to save them at any cost, at any moment. It happened.
So yeah, let me respond. So first of all, the thing about injecting bleach, don't do it. It was meant to be a joke. But if you are willing to take the chance and die from COVID, all the power to you. My only request then is don't come to the hospital. What happens is people say that I'm not going to wear a mask. I don't believe in COVID. If I get COVID, let me die. But when they do get COVID, they come to the hospital and they want a ventilator and they want the oxygen. And now, because of you not believing, not you personally, I'm saying, I'm not speaking to you, sir. I'm just saying you in general. Because of somebody not believing, not taking the precautions, they get sick, they come to the hospital, they are now putting a tax on the system. They're using one ventilator, they're using a doctor's time, they're using a nurse's time, they're using medications, they're using IV. Now, the people who did take precautions and still got COVID, because again, we are in a pandemic, we are not able to treat them more effectively. More importantly, people who have other disorders like diabetes or other things, we're not able to spend our time with them because now we're busy taking care of people who don't believe COVID exists and are overcrowding our hospitals. So I am 100% okay if you or anyone else says that I don't believe in COVID, I'm not going to wear a mask, and if I get it, just let me die or let anyone die. 100%. But then don't come to the hospitals. Don't take away resources from those who are trying to improve the situation, and don't put a tax on the medical system that will eventually make the care for everybody else lower.
Thanks, Amit. And to add to this, I think if you're one of you have read the latest New York Times statistics about India's COVID death, is 4 to 5 million people died in India, according to this international statistics. So the people who do not believe and just trust on the numbers of the government, especially published in India, or are fake numbers, and I wanted to make it officially like a claim and statement this year. So overreacting around it, like, oh, I don't wear a mask and it doesn't happen. You might have seen more than us sitting in the US that 40 lakh people, between the 40 lakh to 50 lakh people died in India. So there it is definitely there. So wearing a mask is not for you. Maybe someone who wants to die, they can die, but do not spread that virus to someone else.
Absolutely. Don't spread the virus and don't come to the hospital, because we are trying our best. And in the same New York Times, if you read some of the medical sections, the health sections, routinely people are talking about the burnout that our doctors and nurses are facing. People are quitting their profession because this is not what they signed up for. They're being pulled to run ICUs. Departments and state governments are going bankrupt. We're not able to fund educational systems because we're creating ventilators. Factories are being shut down from producing things because we're creating ventilators and oxygen supplies. So I don't care if you want to get COVID and die in a hole. That is completely your decision. But if you are one of those people, save other people and don't put a tax on our medical system. That is my plea to you.
So here's the next question. If someone isn't vaccinated and taking great care, can you discuss such situation?
So yeah, as I mentioned to you, I am not here to tell you to get a vaccine or not. There are side effects of the vaccine. So no doctor should be telling you to get it, because, statistics are statistics, right? People will say like, oh, as I even said to you, the vaccines, the side effects are very, very, very low. When you look at like thousands of people, almost nobody gets the side effects. But if you do, that's your life. What if you inject a vaccine and you get the stroke? So there are side effects, and that's where the faith comes in. So if you are taking great care, for example, if you're wearing a mask, if you're social distancing, if you're trying to just stay close to your family, and washing your hands, it is a very good way to help prevent COVID-19. And that's why I was a little bit more forceful on the mask wearing, because it doesn't have the side effects. Getting a vaccine or not is unfortunately still a personal decision, because again, we cannot make anything that has no side effects. But if you are taking great care, which includes all of those things, I think that that's a pretty appropriate way to go forward.
Thanks. So the next question, would like to ask at the end, is it safe for kids to take the vaccine?
Is it safe for kids to take the vaccine? Is that what you said?
Yes, that's a question.
Oh, so the vaccines are currently recommended for anyone over 18. They're not recommended for children yet. There are 3 clinical trials, all done with the Pfizer mRNA vaccine. There's some in the United States and some in Israel, but their results are not come out yet. So for now, I do not recommend children to get the vaccine. I only recommend children to follow precautions, not mix too much with other children, and the adults to take precautions as well when they're around children. But as of right now, we don't have data supporting whether it is safe or not safe for children. So it's not like it's not safe. I'm just saying that the data is not out there to give that recommendation that children should get vaccinated.
Thanks. I think that was the last question.
Can I ask one
I
question?
think there is a question.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry. Go
Hi, doctor. I am Nilkan Chaudhari from Mumbai. I would like to ask, will COVID-19 ever go away from the earth?
There are so many people working to make that a reality, and I certainly hope it will. The only problem is when it goes away, there will be something else. So I 100% can guarantee you that this COVID-19 pandemic will go away. Whether it may take 5 years, 10 years, or whether it will happen this year, I'm not sure, but we are this close to getting a treatment for it. And what I mean by that is COVID-19 caused by the SARS-CoV-2, that is the second generation of the SARS virus. That will go away like any other virus. For example, when there was the smallpox epidemic, or the polio epidemic, or the malaria epidemic, people thought these diseases will never go away, but now rarely do we ever think of them. In the developed country, these things don't even exist. Of course, in India, Africa, some other countries are still having issues with them. But COVID will go away. The question is, the virus also undergoes evolution. So as we become better, the next virus will come, whether it's SARS-CoV-3 or 4 or 5, or whether it's the Ebola virus or some other virus. So we are going to be facing viruses and bacteria for a very, very long time, until we can isolate ourselves from this body, which is the topic of the next.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you.
So here's the next question. Does one need to get oneself revaccinated if their antibodies test at 2 different reputable labs from labs out negative? Sorry, I can't read it.
So it's, I'm not entirely sure what you mean by revaccinated. If you got 2 doses of the Pfizer or the Moderna vaccine, or just 1 dose of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, you are fully vaccinated. If by revaccinated, meaning you only got 1 shot and you're waiting for the second one, I just want to tell you that there's a reason why it's 2 shots. If you get 1 shot of the Pfizer vaccine, and you check the blood levels of people who only got 1 shot, they don't have enough antibodies to coronavirus. If you get the second shot, you create over 80 to 90% antibodies that you need. So you need both shots, okay? Otherwise, you're not vaccinated. So the question isn't revaccinated, you're just Getting one shot means you're not vaccinated at
So-
all. It's no different than getting no shot. If your question is now you've gotten 2 shots, sorry, go ahead.
Revaccinated means both shots.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, if you just got 1 shot, it's as if you have gotten nothing. It's like it's like taking half a pill or something. Like it doesn't work because it doesn't lead to enough antibodies in your system. So yes, you should get the 2nd shot. You should become fully vaccinated, even if your tests are negative. The tests themselves are a point in time, which means that if you take the test today, I can tell you that today you don't have COVID. If you draw the blood and you go outside and someone sneezes on you, I don't know. At the time you drew the blood, you did not have COVID. But if someone sneezed on you, you don't know whether you got it or you did not. So tests really are just there to spot check who has it, who doesn't. They don't really inform us as well. But you do need both shots in order to be fully vaccinated. Otherwise, don't even get the one. It's really that's what I'm telling you. Like getting one means nothing.
I had both my shots, and after both the shots, 3 months after doing both the shots, I had my antibodies tested, and antibodies had not developed. That is what I mean by revaccination.
Got it. Okay, I understand. Sorry, I kind of mistook your question. So there are cases when we see this where people will get both the shots and they will not have enough titers in their blood. However, if you check in the thyroid glands and thymus gland, they still have enough of their B cells, which is a cell type that fights your disease. So there's, if you look in New York Times, actually just like 2 days ago or something, they're saying that a booster shot may be necessary. And so far, the booster shot is only recommended for people over 65 or have very bad health conditions. So if that's you, if you have any bad health conditions, if you're over 65 years old and your antibodies have not developed to the point where it is testable, even after 2 shots, then yes, you should get a booster shot. However, if you are young, if you're healthy, sometimes what happens is your body very effectively makes these antibodies and stores them away in the thymus, just like it makes antibodies to other things. Because it stores it away in the thymus, you don't see them in the blood test. That doesn't mean that the vaccines didn't work or that you're not protected. 2 shots of the vaccine will still prevent you from that. So that's really my answer. If you're over 65, if you have health conditions, then you should consider getting a booster shot. Otherwise, there's no reason to worry.
Thanks. And the next question is, how long vaccines will be effective?
I don't know. This is so new that, vaccines came out like about 6-7 months ago. So how they're effective for 6-7 months. That's what I can tell you. I don't know because it's not like we've had vaccines for years and years. You may know, or you may, if you have children, you definitely know, right? There's some vaccines that you give to children when they're babies, and that's it. For example, the hepatitis vaccines. You give once in a baby, you never have to give it again. There's some vaccines that you have to give over and over. For example, tetanus has to be given every 10 years because it's effective only for 10 years. So we know this because they've been in use for like many, many, many years already. And we have lots of data that tetanus after 10, 15 years stops to be effective. Whereas the hepatitis B vaccine, once you get it, it's there for life. I don't know about COVID because everything is so new, but I can tell you at least that it's effective for 6 to 7 months for as long as we're testing. There are actually longitudinal studies that follow people, the initial group of people who got the Pfizer vaccine. They were all put into a study, mandatory, where every few months they get phone calls and doctor checks for any side effects that are developed. And they check their titers and they check their infectivity to COVID. They take a blood sample and put coronavirus in that blood sample and see if it gets infected. And so far, the 6-7 months that they've been doing this, this is not been shown to go away. So I don't know if it will ever go away. I don't know if everyone will need booster shots or not. That's only time will tell, unfortunately.
Okay. So we have a next question. If I am positive twice in 8 months without serious concerns, do I need a vaccine? Please guide.
If you're tested positive, you at some point had the coronavirus. I'm assuming you're young. I'm assuming you're healthy, and so you fought it off, and good for you. It's again, just because you were young and your body was able to fight it off at the times that you were tested, it doesn't mean that you won't get the disease. I don't know how to emphasize this. Your body, as I mentioned to you, anytime you get a virus or a bacteria, your body goes into attack zone. Your immune system fights it off. If many of you have gotten stomach pains or other random things, or maybe just a normal cough or sneeze or something, and you know that a little bit of fever happens, maybe nothing happens, but your body is constantly fighting. COVID goes into your lungs. You have 2 lungs, you have a big area there. So a little bit of fighting, a little bit of inflammation is not going to kill you. But eventually over time, making these things over and over and over again, there will come a point where your lungs will not be able to handle the amount of damage that they're getting from recurrent wars that's going on. It's you're asking me basically like, just think of it as a war, right? The first missile you drop is not going to collapse the whole country. It may kill a little town or something like that. But let's say more terrorists come, you drop another missile. Now it's 2 towns. Then more comes, then 3 towns and 4 towns. Eventually, at some point, the country will collapse. And it's up to you whether you want to take that risk or not. That's a personal decision.
So the next question, I'm fully vaccinated, taken 2 vaccination shots, but should I take a booster shot or not, and when?
Yeah, again, the literature on this is evolving. We just had the FDA panel review all of this. The Pfizer just published their 3rd trial based on the booster shot themselves. CDC actually published an independent trial, which means that it is not an industry-sponsored trial, it's an academic trial that has nothing to do with money. And those trials and what the FDA now recommends is if you're over 65, or if you have serious health conditions like diabetes or high blood pressure or autoimmune disorders or anything, you should get a booster shot. If you, and again, this applies to the Pfizer vaccine, so I don't know which one you got, but only the Pfizer vaccine has been tested in this way. And in that cases, it does say that you need to get the booster shot if you meet one of those criteria. If you don't, what they have shown is people less than 65 and people who don't have any medical issues at baseline, if you check those people, they continue to have their immunity even without the boosters.
So the next question, are the bats originates coronavirus? Leaving aside what the stories for coronavirus pandemic.
I will encourage you to go on YouTube and just type in the meat market of Wuhan. And if you see the pictures there, it is really horrifying. I mean, the things that they do to the bats and rats and everything that's just flowing there. There's water and the people and the dead animals, the live animals, and people go there and eat and live there. In that condition, viruses and bacteria will mutate and will cause disease. So is the bat where it originated? To this day, we have evidence that yes, that's the case. We have found this coronavirus, a specific strain of coronavirus that infects humans. We found it in a bat species that was in Wuhan, and that was found in the meat market, and that was eaten by the people. And then we found them in those people. So the very first people who got infected that went to the hospital, and we checked the everything they ate for that, and it shows that that's where it came from. There are other theories that China this virus because they want to do some bioterrorism. And don't be so quick to dismiss those theories because it could be true. Bioterrorism is a huge industry. In fact, the United States funds a lot of bioterrorism research. We actively create viruses and bacteria that we can use against other countries. And I'm sure China does that as well. And so whether China created in a laboratory is a possibility. But if you just Google the meat market of Wuhan, I mean, I feel ashamed for the whole human species that something like this exists. And it will cause bacteria and disease, but also such a powerful picture against what we can do for our environment and for nature and for other animals that share our planet.
So next question is, what lactating mothers can take a vaccine? When lactating mothers can take a vaccine after pregnancy?
Yeah, typically after you've stopped lactating. Until then, we encourage just precautions, mask, or hand. The mRNA vaccine are small enough to where they can pass through the breast milk and into the developing baby. As I mentioned, it's not that the vaccine is not safe for the baby, it's just that we don't know. And so you should realize that when a doctor says something to you, that must be based in evidence and based in medicine. Otherwise, there's no reason to trust a doctor versus some other random person saying it. So I have to base what I say on evidence. And because I have none, I will say that you need to stop lactating before you take the vaccine, which typically is between 6 months to a year.
Okay.
And that's only, sorry, just to clarify, that's only if you're lactating and feeding the baby, right? Like if you're actively breastfeeding. Some mothers will continue to lactate, but the baby is bottle fed, then it doesn't really matter. It's only if the baby drinks your actual breast milk. You should wait until the baby stops.
What will be the subject for the next session?
So the next session, we'll talk about how to become digitally immortal. Basically, how we are restricted to your body. In about 100 years ago, people lived to their 30s. Now we're living to our 60s, 80s. Maybe if you're in a developed country, you live to your 100. But how long can you extend the body? And it's not really that long. We see that even if you don't get disease, even if everyone eats everything healthy all the time, the cells will continue to die and your body will continue to die. So is there a way to become completely immortal? That is, meaning live forever. And you'll find out next week.
So there's no more question. So last night on CNBC, FDA rejected Pfizer administration of Pfizer booster shot. So we don't know. Is there any specific reason for that?
I'm sorry, as FDA did.
Administration of Pfizer booster is rejected by an FDA.
Yeah, for young people. That's correct.
Okay,
if you look in the FDA guidelines, it's under 65. Pfizer was going out and saying we need a booster shot. And what the studies showed, so the independent studies from the CDC showed that there's no reason to do that. And so if you read the whole thing, if you're healthy and if you're under 65, then you don't need a booster shot. If you're over 65, if you have conditions, they're saying that it may be beneficial to you, which is really the FDA language saying that we're still investigating. They're not saying it's a recommendation. They're saying it may be beneficial to you if you're over 65 and if you are getting, or if you have these health conditions. So more to come, I'm sure. Every day these things evolve. But so far, that's what they meant. Yeah, I did see that headline.
Thank you. So I think there are no more questions, and I would like to conclude here. Thank you, Amit. Thank you very much for enlightening us on to this complex topics, which are every day evolving in a new topic, new subject, new learning. You are in that field, you are in the research also, especially in the neurology. So enlightening on last session, this session, and awaiting excitingly on the next session. So thanks for that. Thanks for taking the time, and thanks.
Sorry, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Sure. It's a pleasure. And thanks everyone else who joined this meeting and made it successful. Thank you, everyone. I'll stay here. We'll close the call. I'll stay here until everyone leaves, and you can start dropping now.